saving time. I don't know if it affects anybody's schedule, or if it like actually like did it correctly based on their schedule.
Look at this. Updated on my calendar.
Hey. Yeah, I hope so. I don't know because I think it's like international time. I think it's just a little
That's
odd.
true. That's true.
Yeah, I don't think for us, but I mean, they not. No, yeah. Oh, this is a full room already. This is probably the most filled it's been in the first 2 minutes. I'm so excited. Hey guys.
Hello.
This is a power room. Hey Lonnie. This is like a power room. This is a power room. Vivek, you're gonna have a blast today. These are all like the people that I would say a lot of people in here have already even modded. Like the call before. Yeah. We have like usually we take about like the first 5 minutes just to kind of get everybody in the room first. And so now we just chill. Hey Chris. It's been a while since I see you in the call.
Yeah. Hey Vivek, it's so happy to see you here again.
Likewise. Hello.
Hello.
You know who's? Hey Henry, are you? Oh, that is my alarm. Anyway. Yeah, guys, I'm telling you, like this time doesn't. I mean, this time works for me, but it doesn't really work for me. You feel me?
It's the energy. It's the vibe. We're good, Lynn. It works.
Yeah, no. In the morning, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna be like, "What's up, Brittany? What's up, Cosmo?" But you know what? We do fine. We do fine.
This is the library.
This is the library. I know it's supposed to be quiet and stuff, but like this is the public goods library. We know what makes a library good is the energy in the morning, or night for those on the opposite end of the spectrum.
Funny.
Yeah. Let me see. I was looking for. Well, I think June is new today. Hey, June. I think it's my first time seeing you here.
Hey, yeah. I was actually talking to Scott a couple weeks ago, and he invited me to this, so I just wanted to drop in and listen in.
Yeah, awesome to have you. I think everybody had a case of like Scott pulled me in. Like that's literally how this library started. He just pulled a bunch of people he knew. I was like, dang, that was a lot of people that he knew. So.
Although actually, like really, in a lot of ways, Vivek pulled me in the Gitcoin context originally. So it's.
Oh really? Yeah. I'm so glad to bring Vivek back because I accidentally kicked him out. That was horrifying. I'm so glad you're back in.
It's rough. Lynn forcibly removed me from Discord in our one-on-one.
I would blame that I tried. Well, I would say that I tried my best to give you the role for you to join, but I ended up kicking him out instead. I feel so bad. I blame on the bots though, the Discord bots.
That actually wasn't it. Yeah, that happened to me with a few people where you gave someone a role and then it automatically kicked them because for some reason the way that the bot was set up was such that like having Gitcoin in the name is like will kick you out if you like change roles. I don't know why that was the case. Basically, like we just need someone to like, you know, anyone who's like really good at bot setup. Like we need someone else. No one is good at bot setup right now in our crew. We're just
practically Scott saying don't blame me. Anyway, actually, I see Gamma. I think this is also the first time I'm seeing you in this call. Like pretty much everybody else here is a regular, so I'm really excited about that. Hey Gamma. I don't know if they're here today.
Oh, I know Gamma. Hey, so happy to see you here.
Hi Gamma.
Hi, wonderful. I was speaking to Gamma.
Is it your first time on the call?
Actually, I joined 2 weeks ago, I think, and yeah, a little bit late, but
oh, you're not late. We're just chilling.
Was the first one to was the first one to invite me, and really happy to be here. Like really excited about this discussion.
Yeah, honestly.
Who invited you?
What did you say,
Who
Chris?
invited you? Yeah,
Lenny.
I was wondering. Okay, nice.
Nice.
Lonnie, you're gonna hold Gamma through the entire process, okay? Like we're gonna welcome him like strong. So pretty much everybody in here is like, just for context, everybody here in this call is like a regular, right? So like June and Gamma, if you guys have any thoughts or anything during the call, like, or like, and also Victor, sometimes I see you here too. feel free to just chime in your thoughts, right? Because we definitely want everybody here to be speaking up, like, on their thought, because sometimes it can be intimidating on, like, in a new room. So we'd love to, like, hear you guys. And that's it. I'll bring it over to Vivek to start his mod.
Amazing. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Lots of familiar faces, lots of new faces. If I haven't met you yet, it's great to meet you. I hope we have fun today. Enjoy the discussion. And I'll try to set it up more conversationally for the next 40-ish minutes. I have only modded once, but it's really an honor to be here. Scott, I know when we first moved over to the Gitcoin Discord, was talking about different ways to bring together interesting conversational spaces, and we were talking about it in a lot of different capacities, and it's really wonderful to see that intention borne out in the library channel, just being able to like scroll through and see how many interesting ideas are shared on a consistent basis. The types of people that are in this room today consistently inspire me. So I'm really grateful to be here. The context that I shared was thinking, I guess the title of the week was thinking about communities of care and what that word care actually means, and what types of environments contribute to communities of care. And the context in the public goods library that at least we're coming with from the kernel side is this sense that one of the most meta level public goods is the ability to care, the ability to feel deeply connected, both to yourself and to others. And this, at like kind of the most lived experiential level, being the seed required for any interesting work to take place in an external context, bringing in infrastructure for many others. So there's a bit of an intro I guess I could do from the kernel side, which I'll just take like 4 or 5 minutes to do that. And then I want to get into this article from Andrew Cortina. Maybe I'll pause while I'm doing that transition if there are any questions on kernel. So the way that I want to share that is not actually like by talking a lot about kernel. I don't think that that's like the good context, but for us, there's kind of like some philosophical underpinnings. And let me know if my screen is sharing okay. Mm-hmm. Cool. There's some philosophical underpinnings to kernel that represent like how the program is set up. The first of which is this program that inspired kernel in a lot of ways, which is called Titans, which is a program I was in as a senior in college at university in Texas. The university was Texas A&M. There's 50,000 students. This is big university. It was pretty homogenous, to be honest. Probably like 95% of the people at the university came from kind of like similar geographic backgrounds and let's say political backgrounds. Very, very homogenous space. And it was something that I struggled with for a lot of my college career. Although I really enjoyed school and I did okay in the finance department and was like, you know, generally doing well on paper. And I was going through the school. I ended up making it into some interesting programs throughout the years that built a resume. And the magnum opus of a resume at Texas A&M, at least, was getting into this program called Titans. It was, for whatever reason, considered to be some really exciting space to be in. It was really kind of hard to see it from the outside. But you know, you needed to get like 5 recommendations at least to get in from people that had been through the program before. There were some like really unique questions that they asked in the application flow that weren't the types of questions that you typically got if you're trying to get into like a finance program. And it was just kind of like an enigma, but being somebody who was, you know, trying to get good grades and trying to get into good programs, I tried to apply. I didn't get in the first time, but I got in the second time. And there's a lot I can say about like the program. But the first thing that became clear very quickly, and there's this syllabus from spring 2015 when I was in Titans, was that it wasn't a finance class. Was one of the first things that we very quickly found out. It was taught by Britt Harris, who is the CEO of Bridgewater, and for those of you who come from a finance background, you know it's like one of the largest hedge funds in the world. And so when you come in, you kind of expect this guy to be a typical kind of like financier who would tell you all about how to invest well. And then you come into the course and he's asking questions that are finance related, like market efficiency and global investing strategies and alternative investment approaches. But each week was tied back to questions like, why should you become successful? What are your personal constraints? How do you make decisions? My personal favorite was, who is right to love? And that talk, which is called the Titans Relationship Talk, was kind of like halfway through the semester. You had everyone dress up, which was true of every class, bring your significant others, if you had any. And him and his wife led the relationship talk, talking about their 40-year marriage and the ways that had progressed, and, you know, their journey to having a family and being active in their communities and what that looked like to them. And so what became clear as you go through the semester is that, one, Britt really cared about us. He made that very clear by the fact that, you know, as much as he had, you know, a Rolodex of like billionaire friends around the world, or he could get the director of the CIA to come to College Station to have barbecue with us and talk about his role in the military. He would also respond to our emails within, you know, 25 minutes and ask us about our partners and tell us stories at the fireside. And this level of care was something that we could sense came not only from, you know, an interest in making Titans like an interesting program, but also because Britt himself was just having a ball. He just really, really enjoyed himself, and he cared for his own mental state along the way. And I won't say like too much more about Titans. The last thing that I usually end with in kind of shorter settings is that I ended up going to 4 weddings of people I was in Titans with, which is kind of crazy considering there was only 17 people in the program. And we all are still good friends. I'm still waiting for my other wedding invitations. But the point that I get at is that like this community of care has ripple effects well beyond any professional or typical financial outcomes. And this to me was like the best example of what I think now a DAO should look like. Better than literally anything that I've seen so far in the Web3 world. And so I hold Titans very dear to my heart, and it had me asking a lot of questions like in the early days of Kernel. And as you can see, like the Kernel syllabus and the way that Kernel was set up, even Junto's and like the introductions channel, all of it in some sense goes back to Titans. And if I could put words into what was achieved, I would need a lot of help. And so I have a couple of other like articles that people in Kernel will be familiar with. One is actually not an article, it's a game by a man named Nikki Case, which describes like this phenomenon of care through a game called The Evolution of Trust. The way that those questions are asked are things like, what is trust? Who do you trust? And why do you trust them? And the most specific question that gets asked is, would a world without trust be richer or poorer? And this game is put at the bottom of the trust module. In Web3 circles, we talk a lot about trust because, you know, we think that we're building trustless systems, and there's all the like definitions of trust that come into describing Bitcoin, and we do a lot of that in Kernel. But one of the things that we describe, and I think that this game describes well, is that there is no such thing as trustless systems. There's simply being able to move away from trusting the media or the protocols that we are operating within, the platforms that we're operating within, back to trusting people, other people, or perhaps trusting yourself more than you did prior. And that's not trustless, right? There's always a requirement for trust, and there's a real moral imperative to build systems that allow for greater trust, which is why I'm a big fan of Web3. But this game takes a different approach into describing, okay, like what actually evolves trust. And they talk about repeat interactions. Trust keeps relationships going, but you need to know that there could be other spaces where you find yourselves with people that you engage with, which the public library is a good example of, you know, a space outside of kernel where I see lots of friendly faces. The potential for win-win scenarios where games can be played amongst members in ways that both benefit. And then the reduction of miscommunication, which when you have spaces like the public library again, where people are meeting on a repeat basis, there are norms being set, there are ways by which rituals can lead to enjoyable spaces, this also helps grow trust. So I thought that was always really interesting, and that's a big part of what I think is required for communities of care. The other way to talk about trustful environments, especially as you explore DAOs, is by going back to who we think are the spiritual predecessors to DAO creators, which is game designers, specifically designers of web scale games. And there's this really wonderful website called Lost Garden, which is described as a treasure trove of readable, thoughtful essays on game design theory, art, and the business of design. And you have a game designer named Daniel Cook, who's really, really awesome. If you look up Daniel Cook and find any of his stuff on the internet, you'll find just like some incredible stuff. He was one of the primary writers of this article that was called Pro-Social Economics for Game Design. And it starts with a quote from Kurt Vonnegut, which should have been quoted on this slide, from 1974. So it's not a particularly recent quote, but it seems really meaningful today. It says, "What should young people do with their lives today? Many things, obviously, but the most daring thing is to create stable communities in which the terrible disease of loneliness can be cured." Terrible disease of loneliness can be cured. And it's from that point that this article starts off. It's an incredible article. They have lots to say about tactics, lots to say about toxic patterns to avoid, and much more than has ended up on the slide, where I've only put the 5 things that they tend to focus on as patterns to aim for in pro-social games, and perhaps what I would say are also patterns for communities of care. I'll start with the second bullet point, which I think is actually the most important one, which is thriving individuals. The facilitation of individual happiness. Individuals feel competence, volition, relatedness, both for themselves and for their friends. Then you can go to friendship. You can talk about altruism, positive group norms, and shared goals. Some shared purpose that can consistently keep that group rowing in a similar direction. A couple of other things that I would say are really important in communities of care include non-coercion, the ability for somebody to opt in and out of circles based on their preference and not feel some incredibly high social cost, the ability to kind of like move throughout space as well. And a lot of this is why, you know, like me, I think all of us are excited about Web3 because these things seem to be more possible, but it isn't always the case, right? Like a lot of the times, my sense is that working in DAOs does not always feel careful in many senses of the word, and that's just the nature of like where we are in the process in a lot of ways. But it is something that I try to return to often in my own life, just so that I can enjoy this period of time that is a very wild period, the most that I can. And this is where I would move to this article from Andrew Cortina, and perhaps get into this next. But before that, I'd be open to questions, thoughts, discussion, anything, if anyone wants to.
I can just say a quick thank you to you real quick, Vivek, because you bringing me into Kernel for a bit pretty much brought me full circle. So I was in Gitcoin for a bit, but after joining around through there, Sid brought me back into Gitcoin, and now I've been on these for the last few weeks. So yeah, thank you for bringing me into Kernel.
Of course. And awesome.
Really love that the Nikki Case game has become such a central point as well, in particular, just because I feel like it is just such a great expression of a lot of the problems that we're trying to think through in the space, in like much more of like a pro-social way, because often we tend to, there like was a time in the space where like everything was like immutable, trustless, smart contracts that didn't require people and everything's automated. And like I think this shift back to focusing on like the communities that we're part of is really key. I'd actually one other person that I think people don't even know now that I'd credit with some of that is like Vlad Zamfir. And Vlad, actually there's a quiz I'll link in the weekly call chat that Joshua Tan from Metagov put together, which just like kind of gives you your like political alignment within the context of like, are you a Zamfirist, or are you like with all these different like groups. But he was really one of the key people that also brought this sort of more like pro-social, like not code is law thinking to the space. So it's like really important.
Vlad is huge, for that history.
Yeah, maybe I just want to also say some words.
Sure.
I mean, for example, like within the crypto community, what I appreciate is like this altruistic relationship that we are forming, even though we don't know it. For example, like as we see, like all the airdrops was happening, like for example, like Uniswap, because like you were using the services, or for example, like you were giving some token to Gitcoin grants, and then you were rewarded with this token and also with the ENS name service, just because like you just happen to also have a domain, and then you realize that you just do it because like this is something that you value, but at the same time the organizations also appreciate that you also have value to the service, and this makes it also a little bit a game changer about seeing like the relationship with technology that we are forming with. So just some thoughts that I want to give.
Yeah. Super important thoughts, things that have come up a lot in kernel recently as we think about what do these airdrops like really mean over like a longer time arc for the people who are playing the longer pro-social games. How do we think about it? I think Brinley put up a interesting tweet yesterday from ENS when he said, you're not being airdropped money, you're being airdropped responsibility, which I find kind of funny because I know that in reality that's not how everyone sees it, but it's an interesting repositioning.
So, love that the Encase game has become such a great resource, and that everybody loves it so much. I've shown it around a lot. If anyone has any ideas for mechanisms to be turned into games like this, we're planning on releasing some sprite packs and game assets and having a small game jam. So if there are specific pro-social mechanisms that we want to make games like this around, I'd love to hear them.
That's a great prompt. Nikki Case has a few other games that might be worth exploring in that type of a setting, and
but we'll bring him in for the game jam.
Well, that's good one, Nikki. I don't know that he knows he's become such an inspiration in Web3 circles, but that would be awesome. We have been trying to get in touch with him. The pro-social economics and the Lost Garden folks would be not sure, like how involved they can be, but there's some really interesting stuff from this this particular article that are much more tactical and like implementable, perhaps in a game jam. So just for context, pro-social economics for game design. I'm sure somebody can link it. Cool.
Yeah, I have a question for Vivek before he moves on, regarding the last slide. So, the question is about the opposite end of loneliness. Like when you meet so many awesome people, and I know Vivek has met like thousands of them by this point due to Kernel and his other adventures in Web3. Like, how do you go about like friendship and altruism when you only have so much to give and receive?
Yeah. It's it's a really important question, and it's interesting because it's the reason why I chose to say thriving individual first, even though it's listed second in this list of bullet points in the game. Because as time has gone on, I've spoken about this particular article a few times, and starting with friendship it's really close, right? Like thriving individuals and friendship, we are social animals, and so there's some level in which friendship should come first, because we cannot survive without each other. But I kind of oscillate back and forth between saying thriving individual first and then saying friendship first, and the reality being that the facilitation of your own lived sense of play and care for yourself is the only way that you can care for others. I'm not the first in saying this, but I think that in DAO culture, we need to ask ourselves, like, is this happening? And it's something that, for myself, I try to be, I try to keep kind of like front and center in my experience of Kernel. And my biggest inspiration for that is Brit from Titans, because the reality of why Titans was what it was because Brit was having so much fun in the process. When we had our 17 people together for my Titans group, it just so happened that one of the people was a gold medal Olympian swimmer. And Brit made it a point for us all to go to the A&M swimming pool together. And instead of like taking swim lessons from Bria, which all of us were trying to do to, try to get better, he asked if he could get on the diving board, and he belly flopped off the diving board as a starting point to that particular swim lesson. And he was just having so much fun. It was just like something that allowed us to think about the program much broader than a finance course. And I think is the reason why we ended up dancing on the dance floor at each other's weddings, right? Not my wedding, but other weddings. And so I guess that would be one way to answer the question.
Yep, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, cool. Well, I'll move to kind of like a second area of inspiration for me personally, and another kind of like Nikki Case type figure that I think usually hides under the radar a bit. His name is Andrew Cortina, and he has a wonderful website called cortina.nyc. It's his personal website. It's one of my favorite things on the internet. One of my big hopes for Web3 is that we return to the culture of personal websites, because I've found like so much joy in just a few personal websites, Cortina's being one of them. My story with Cortina, I feel very grateful, started with, it was my first kind of like job in technology. I was a finance student out of school. I did like consulting for a little bit, and I wanted to make my way to San Francisco. And on paper, I was just looking for kind of like the best opportunity that fit what I thought was like a really interesting startup that was with really interesting people. And I stumbled upon a company called Fin, which I won't get into too much, but the two people who were the co-founders of this company were a man named Sam Lesson, who had previously been the VP of product at Facebook, and then this guy named Cortina, who had co-founded Venmo. And they had gotten together and they were doing this Fin thing, and it still exists today. They're still working on it today, but it's kind of changed a lot since those days. But in order to like understand like these people and just like see who they were, I stumbled across some of their writings. Sam has done a lot of writing, and so has Cortina. Cortina's website, like completely blew me away. There's all types of articles on this, including a really cool one on the origins of Venmo, which is more of like kind of like a starter pack article. But then a lot of them like read like this one. They have titles like "The Hero with 8 Billion Faces." Cortina, I think, went to Penn, if I'm not mistaken, and started as a computer science student, but ended up saying, I don't really want to do computer science, and studied philosophy. And so you'll see in his writing kind of like all sorts of inspirations. And I just want to like talk through some of these stories that he puts in this post, "The Hero with 8 Billion Faces." And you know, like, I usually wouldn't do this, but maybe because this one's a short one, I'll just read the story, the first part of "The Hero with 8 Billion Faces." Funny picture, the beach bum, 2019. It says, "My senior year of college, I was supposed to go to Key West for spring break with some friends. The night before we were supposed to leave, I lost all my money in a poker game, like $800. A friend loaned me enough cash to pay for a bus to get down there, but not back. When I got there, I found a job on a lobster boat, setting traps, and I made enough money to pay for beer. Instead of staying 1 week, I stayed 6. I got back to campus for the end of the semester, walked into the dorm at 6 a.m., and my roommate said, 'Where have you been? Don't you have finals?' 'I have one at 9, I said. It was a music final in this big auditorium. I went in wearing faded blue jeans, cut-off shorts, no shoes, not even flip-flops, no shirt, long sun-bleached hair, and a long mustache. When the professor saw me, he said, 'Mr. Cortina, where have you been all semester?' 'Didn't you get my doctor's note? I've been in the hospital with mononucleosis.' He just looked at me for a few seconds, then said, 'If you're going to have the balls to walk in here looking like that, with that story, I'm not going to ask you any more questions.'" This is a story it seems like Cortina got from his dad. This was a story by his dad. And he said it was one of his favorite stories growing up. He kind of like thinks a little bit about why this is one of his favorite stories. He talks about the humor, the irreverence, the disdain, the healthy disdain for institutions and bureaucracy. And also kind of like the sense that, well, hey, like, you know, the stakes were not really all that high at the end. It was just an exam. And really talks about like this relationship with his dad. And I hope some of you have read this, and you kind of get a sense of like the relationship that Cortina had with his dad and the ways that Cortina has like really taken in these things that his father did. And from there, he transitioned to talking about life with his mother. His mother was really interesting as well. She had a 9-to-5 job. She did some admin work at Merck. She worked a few nights a week and on the weekends at a clothing store, at the cash register. But she would still do all these things at home for Cortina and his sister, who I also luckily got to know when I was at Finn. Both of them are great. So she would cook up meatballs and beef stew. She would heat up the meals on the nights that she worked. She would, on weekends, like make time to leave them a list of chores listed on little scraps of paper, vacuum the room, sweep the kitchen, mow the lawn. Even if they didn't do it, you know, it was a part of the process. And there's a lot more here about, you know, about these ideas. Cortina then goes further and talks about how, like, against the backdrop of these stories, there's like the ideas about the profit motive, about development and the creative act, and how the profit motive is supposedly the means by which we lead to progress. And eventually he starts talking about this artist, which was one of the main reasons that I like wanted to bring this post up, who's defining like what the sense is of what art looks like. And I don't really know as much about this artist, so I don't want to say too much about it, but this is the point that really stood out. It says, Eucalis made me realize that the profit motive and the art world both tend to favor the new and the creative act. So usually the profit motive and the art world are tended to be seen as different things. But in this case, the creative act, development, this is where true art lives for most people. But her art is radical and profound because it instead celebrates maintenance. Make no mistake, she's not opposed to progress and development of the new. The point is that development and maintenance are both essential, but these complementary systems are out of balance because our culture biases towards mechanisms for recognizing and rewarding only one side of the equation. In 68, there was no valuing of maintenance in Western culture. The trajectory was make something new, always move forward, always move forward. So, the story ends. I'll skip ahead to this kind of like fun game that Cortina talks about that his mom made for him and his sister. And he talks about the way that they used to play on their birthdays. His mom would make them some small treasure hunts. They would write clues on little scraps of paper, just like the chores, and you would go from clue to clue and try to find the little birthday gifts. And this is actually a picture of Cortina and his sister in the woods as they were looking for it. The presents were wrapped with brown paper, Lanico grocery bags, nothing too crazy or fancy, but enough to maintain like a really beautiful, careful childhood. And you know, there's all these different things that his mom took care of, all these like small pieces of paper that made up memories from their childhood. And he writes that she had the foresight to imagine that we might look back fondly on these records of our childhood. And then it ends with this kind of like, I would say, bittersweet note. And I'll end here and see if there's interesting conversation. But he says, none of the treasure hunt clues survived, however. There was no one to preserve these things my mom made, no one to scan them years later and burn them onto a CD to give her on Christmas. This like ending to the article really, really struck me. And it represents to me like why Cortina has always been a real inspiration to me. He's found a way to show me, for somebody who's built something like Venmo and who's worked on technical systems of immense scale, how much it matters to him to think about, you know, burning a small CD to give to his mother on Christmas, or the lack of having done that, and the awareness of the care that had been put into him, into his childhood, and why it mattered. All of this to me is like a really good lived experiential reminder from somebody who also thinks very technically, like many of us in this room, of what it really means like to build a community of care and the types of inspirations and motivations that we can look to from worlds of maintenance and public good, from the caretakers that have brought us to where we are in our lives today. So I think that's really all I have for today, and I'm hopeful that that's enough to break us into conversation.
Really is a beautiful article and piece and sort of thought, and it's definitely something that when we think about like community, like it kind of often does start there. So like kind of it's interesting that like we often abstract away from that a little bit as we kind of like expand the worlds that we're part of. But I think that's a really good kind of like reminder, and it's a great sort of like kind of thing for everyone here to think about. Definitely resonates with me.
And Scott, I don't know if you remember, but I think we met Cortina together. He was at Radical Exchange in Detroit that year. And I'm trying to remember if you two would have met.
What year was that? No, it's like it feels like the last 2 years have been really.
That was, I think, 2019. Did you go in Detroit? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know if I did, but we should definitely find time to meet.
Cartooning, definitely. I bring that up because he's done some writing as well about like radical markets and radical tax reform and things like that. If people are into it, but yeah, a different conversation.
Thank you so much, Vivek, for this beautiful presentation. Merle Latterman Okeles, the artist referenced in the essay, is one of my favorite artists. I don't know where I responded, I think, to your original post sharing the article with a video of her reciting her manifesto for maintenance art, which she wrote in 1969 as a proposal for an exhibition. And I would recommend everyone to take a listen if you're curious. But it was just like so revolutionary to consider art beyond art as commodity. And I think all of these questions about how do we center care in our design of these systems and the organizations that we're building right now is so essential to transcend the challenges that we're witnessing in Web 2, of like the way that those systems have been built around the priority of monetization and the commodification of attention, and how we might really reimagine that in a radical way, centered around how the care of ourselves and each other and of the entire planet, understanding us as an ecosystem, interdependent and interconnected. I feel like this is such an important conversation to be having. So thank you so much for initiating this dialogue today.
Thank you so much. I owe a great deal of time, I hope, to this work. Mirle Latterman. Can you say the last name, Lonnie? So I'm not.
Ukeles. Yeah, you were correct. You got it right the first time. It's a hard name. Her name is like it's really tricky.
Yeah, and when you said it, I recognize it. Yeah, like Cortina has this manifesto at least in here. I want to find the video and perhaps
I linked it. Yeah, I put a link to it in the public library chat. I'll make sure I did it in the public one because there's a couple different lines there. But it's beautiful to hear her reciting it too, because she's, she was a young mother that had left the New York art scene and felt sort of like not abandoned, but like that she was outside of things. And this was her moment of reclaiming her own art practice, of maintaining as valid and valuable beyond the existing prevailing art scene, and claiming that understanding of what was valuable. And I feel like for me, that's part of what's so resonant, right? That right now we have this opportunity to redefine both individually and collectively what we value and what we care about and what we want to see flourishing in the world. And we just it's really so meaningful for me to center in an awareness of care in having those conversations and contemplations.
Thank you so much, Lonnie.
Thank you.
Yeah, I liked. I've read a bunch of stuff from Cortina as well, but yeah, I liked a lot of what Lonnie was saying around like maintenance as care, I guess, as opposed to surveillance as care. Given that, well, if you think about like say, we have like video or cameras or videos for our pets and our kids to care about them because we're not able to, be with them in person. Not that those are bad, but it's kind of just interesting. Or even at school, for using Zoom, like all the kids have to have their camera on to know that they're doing work, or even at work, right, where you have to be on like apparently someone was telling me like if you're on like Slack and then you like are away, then they might track that you're like not there or something, or if you're offline instead of being online. Um, and thinking that that's a good way of whether someone's doing a good job or doing work. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Points to something really interesting, like this felt sense of care, right? Like it's not something that can be easily turned into kind of like an action item. You can make space for it and make sure that you do your to-do list of chores, but yeah, I see what you mean on like surveillance. As one of our maintainers on the call, we owe you a great deal of gratitude for what you've done for the internet at large, frankly. But I can understand the difference between care and surveillance in many contexts. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess what you just said, it makes me think of it's also like an outsourcing of care to either the program or maybe the smart contract, or like maybe that's related to trustlessness too, of like feeling like I don't have to be there. I don't have to be in someone's presence to like care for them. And you know, he has this example of his dad and his mom. It's like very personal, right? So.
Yeah.
Everyone is stunned into silence. It's
That's good.
Silence is good. Good.
I feel like I don't know, like David Phelps, you usually have a lot of thoughts on the more Web3 stuff. I'm curious if you have some thoughts on this.
Hi guys. Annika, do you want to say hi as well?
Hey everyone, I'm here with David in Miami.
I think we're enjoying listening to this, and also just like Vivek and Lani, your voices are like, you guys need a radio show.
We have you on the like big speaker, and it's like beaming through the living room, and it's quite beautiful.
This is better than therapy, like just in terms of like meditative calm for the morning. Yeah, I am like relaxed, like my cortisol is down. Like, yeah, there's a level of care in how you guys speak as well that I just want to point out. That's my only insight.
we accept ENS tokens as payment for therapy today.
Amazing.
I love you both, Annika and David. Thank you for being with us. Yeah. I see. Is this Kyle? Is this Kyle from Gitcoin? Like Kyle Weiss? I'm like, this is a younger version of Kyle, if it is. But yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else from this article.
Like one thing that caught my attention, like, and it was like interesting for us maybe to dive a bit deeper, like would be this like distinction between surveillance and maintenance. I would love to define the boundaries a bit better together. I feel this could be an interesting direction to continue. If you think.
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts here. I'm in Houston, Texas, and for those of you who are familiar with like the music scene, Astroworld was a big festival that ended in tragedy in Houston recently. There were 8 casualties, and it's a whole thing. Like the whole city is, I think, still kind of reeling from it because it's just like such a tragic way for something like this to happen. And there's a lot of ways that you can talk about this, but I have a friend who's both an architect and a experiential designer. Was also into Web3. Some of you probably met him at Kernel dinners if you've been in New York City. Harry, his name's Harry Chadda. And he's familiar with these spaces. And the thing that he reminded me was just like how many people go into the production of a festival like this, and kind of like how much of a storm it takes for something like of this magnitude to go wrong, for 8 people to pass away at a festival in such a tragic way. But like the key thing that you can look at and pretty obviously catch in this, just looking at the facts so far, is that it was a toxic environment to work and to be a maintenance focused individual. It was clear that anyone who had a maintenance job in this particular venue was overwhelmed and did not have good ways to describe the situation before it was too late. And it reminds me, of all of the GitHub comments and issues on open source repositories when you have 2 or 3 maintainers who are trying to deal with, 15 or 20 or 20,000 issues or issue reports or requests, which Henry can talk about probably more than I can. But it's a similar sense of like the people that are involved in this process of ensuring stability are not themselves being taken care of, and the structure is not provided for them to take care of themselves. And so often in these environments, we resort to just taking care of ourselves because that's the most that we can do. And it's a structural fault of systems that put too much weight, quite literally, on people in situations where it's not necessary that it has to happen that way.
Yeah, it makes me think also like roles can be very rigid. So like this is changing in society, but I feel like the roles is still very rigid. So like I do something and there's this mindset I cannot do something else, and then you cannot help others. You cannot be there for others because that's not your expertise. Something like that.
Yeah, that's such a important. Well, I feel like that's such a beautiful distinction about at least my own experience working in DAOs, is that when the hierarchy is more distributed, there's a natural encouragement to stretch outside of, like, you have your focus, but there's an encouragement to experiment or explore beyond that. And I feel like also just in any kind of cooperative business environment, like when you imbue everyone with a sense of ownership, with that comes a natural stewardship and responsibility where, I don't know, yeah, like the equivalent of that here. But that, like in this kind of a situation, like probably a lot of people saw like this is, there's too many people, there's not, the safety precautions are not right, but they didn't feel empowered to speak up and talk about it, or they didn't have a clear channel to do so, or they were overworked and they were overworked and underpaid. And I think like really asking ourselves in what we're building, how can we radically take care of everyone we're working with in a way that, prevents that from ever occurring, that everyone feels so supported just in living and also in the work that they're engaged with, and have like clear channels of how to navigate when things come up, that can create a very different reality in which those kind of things don't occur in the future. One of the reasons I'm very, very excited about the idea of like a DAO basic income and creating like at least at the very minimum like a financial stability for everyone participating, so that they feel cared for at the very least in the way of meeting their own essential needs.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's alright. But maybe, like I was actually like thinking about this like maybe a month ago or something. I was talking about this, and there was this space with for people to open up the learning dimensions. I feel like can only exist if we create cultures that welcomes vulnerability, because like I think this professional mindset can sometimes I don't know, like it has this is a bit contaminated in DAOs like from the, okay, sorry. Let me phrase myself better. It's late here, I'm a bit tired, but I feel that DAOs can be sometimes contaminated about this like professional unprofessional behavior, and the professional behavior is like to be like always yes, always productive, always good, and this is was I feel is many times forced, and like if we're designing a new system, like we can as well imagine like a new way of doing this, which okay, you can be there, you can say yes, but you also have space to be vulnerable and say like I need help with this, or like I'm going through this, in my life. I don't know.
Sure. Definitely. Definitely.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly.
I really love this piece, and I really liked what Gamma have said about sort of providing that safe environment for people to have that kind of sense that they'll be grounded and things will be okay. Because when I look at this piece, it's very striking, but I also think it poses maintenance and development as a sort of oppositional binary, when I think it's maybe more like a continuity in ways, because it is through the process of maintenance that you know refine and develop, and often you know maintenance in this sense is almost a very, it becomes like a physical routine, but the development happens more in the mind. It's when you reframe even your approach to the same task that the development happens. I mean, one really common therapy sort of approach is that you approach a routine that you're either scared of or you have trouble with from a totally new context, a totally new angle, and so you know, kind of from in that way, maintenance can cross over into play, and then into development. So I think giving people that space, that safety to feel like they can play, that they can, you know, create, that's when development can really flourish.
I really, really love that. I really love that. It's like when you bring up the complementary opposite, right? Like it's like you have development, you have maintenance, but then you have beyond both of those into kind of some middle state. I'd actually be really curious to know if you could expand upon that technique. It sounds like approaching a habit pattern from a new angle. Would there be like an example of that? Sure, I know we're close to time too, so.
Yeah. So I think one is I've done art therapy in the past, and one thing is that like I've really struggled with creative blocks. So classically, I would, you know, traditionally kind of paint and draw in a certain environment. What I was, you know, encouraged to do is to, you know, maybe kind of disentangle myself from my usual mediums and take a crayon and you know, instead of drawing at a desk, tape a large piece of paper to the wall and then hold the crayon differently, like grip it almost like the way a child would, and then just go wild. So that shifting of perspective completely shifts how I relate to the act of creating and drawing in particular.
So beautiful, yeah. And it reminds me of, like, from the piece, the way that I was originally presenting it was, Cortina's mother, her creative act of putting together this game for their birthday. But what the creative act was really allowing Cortina and his younger sister to play, and for them to play within a pattern that they were not used to, by kind of like, by definition, this treasure hunt is something that like gets them out of their comfort zone. And I think that's like one of my takeaways from spending time with Cortina's work is like he's just playing, and his pattern of plays, he's finding ways to shift it when he comes across blocks, and maybe there's not as much of a distinction between maintenance and development because he's found like a balance, a way to move through them both.
Absolutely. And I think the way that the treasure hunt reframes the gifts that they would discover at the end totally changes the ways in which they relate to that gift and that whole experience. So yeah, really, really great points.
Love it, love it, love it. Thank you so much. Thank you. I just wanted to check with Scott how we're doing on time, if we're usually pretty lax or want to keep it rolling, or if we should.
Yeah, if anyone has other thoughts or questions, definitely want to give people space. We have a little bit of time, but we can also probably wrap pretty soon just since we're just past the hour.
Cool. Well, for anyone who has to go, thank you so much for joining, spending time. If you have any questions or thoughts, I'm around in Discord, and also Kernel. Kernel Block 5 starts in January, and we explore some of these ideas. We have lots of friends here in Kernel Block 4 that I'm excited to wrap well with and celebrate the end of the block with in the next few weeks.
Thank you so much, Vivek. And I think Kernel is an amazing space. I think a lot of people here are already part of it or know about it, but if you haven't already looked into it for Block 5 coming up just early next year, I would definitely recommend that experience. So check it out.
I'm happy to stick around for a bit if anyone has questions, but thanks everybody. If anyone has to drop.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vivek.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Really excited to be here more.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Thanks, Vivek.
See you next week. Cheers.
Thanks very
Thank
much,
you
folks.
for-
I'm gonna
yes.
throw a related article up in the library channel that talks about how NFTs and crypto are actually turning the whole internet into a game, and we're slowly getting the artifacts to play it. So I'll post that in the library channel for people to check out. Thanks.
Thanks, David. Thank you.
I also posted the Latterman Ukele's maintenance for manifesto art, if anyone's curious about that.
Definitely. I'm a Discord noob, so I'm scared to click private public goods library. Is it gonna? Am I gonna leave if I click that?
No, I don't think so. You have to click the phone with the X next to it at the bottom of the screen.
Okay.
Yeah, red button.
Okay, it's a moment of truth. Here we go. Okay, I'm here. Perfect. Merely Latterman Ukuleles. I'm so excited to watch.
There's a longer one I can share with you too if you like that one. That one's just like 10 minutes and it's just her reading the manifesto at a Creative Times Summit, which is this wonderful, it's an arts organization in New York that primarily funds public art, but they also have many years hosted the Creative Times Summit, which is like sort of an open conference, very much I would say in a parallel spirit of Kernel, but as a like a weekend or week-long conference that brings together social practice artists and facilitates, well, like allows them to give presentations on their work, and then they do all these smaller breakout rooms, and it's in a different city every year. It hasn't happened for the last few, but I've attended several, and they've all been wonderful experiences.
That's awesome. That's so cool.
Hey Vivek, QZ here from Singapore. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I have a question actually. So I think, like just hearing about how you build communities of care is really incredible. But I'm quite curious about how do you maybe, I'm not sure how to put it, but like for me, every time I try and do something like this, I always have to sort of undo or unlearn or get people to face or figure a way to be comfortable because of like past trauma or something like that. Like how does one, create like a sufficiently safe space, right? I mean, right now we mostly use like facilitation skills, right? You try and make yourself more open first, and then people may open up. But I mean, I come from a place where it's really getting very difficult to trust community building because like people have been using it as a way to like try and get you to buy their token or some shit. So like, how would you approach this?
Yeah. Well, like step one is don't have a token that somebody's trying to buy. Or,
yeah, of course not. Right?
That part helps. The those types of Web3 primitives, like I think, can be introduced with care, and that's kind of like the answer to the question at some sense in kernel is that at the starting point, in the way that it is described and in the way that it is there is a very deep technical infrastructure behind kernel as well. If you come to kernel and you're working on a Web3 project and you're looking for ideas about where Web3 may go over the next decade, there's a whole exploration down that path that is available. And for somebody who perhaps wants to focus there and is excited about putting their energy there and perhaps is not looking to have types of conversations, non-coercion is definitely like one of the main principles of kernel in that regard, and allowing for different types of spaces for somebody to choose from. For example, in this block, if you were keen on focusing on DeFi and DAOs and perhaps gaming or just building a project from 0 to 1, there are many more practical focus, conversational spaces, and build-oriented spaces. But the nature of the syllabus is that it does require or offer, I suppose, ways for you to go deeper. And the reality that is true within building any technology application is that you will be forced to reckon with your own intentions and your own personal journey quite often. So the syllabus doesn't shy away from that truth, and it allows you to kind of like hopefully kernel allows you to find spaces that are your choice in how you want to pursue that.
I can elaborate a bit on that, Vivek, if you want.
Sure.
Yeah, so like having been through these non-coercive exploratory spaces in kernel, like my personal thing is to explore the depths of any community I'm a part of. So I oversubscribe myself to every kernel guild and channel possible just to track and be involved in the things that are happening and to engage with people. But what was more important for me was really the stewards opening up. Like Vivek and I had a long and deep conversation one evening, and so that was quite crucial for me to consider it a really safe space. And I've seen Vivek, Andy, Alicia, and everyone just opening up about their journeys in as much depth as possible. So I think that's also as important as the space itself. Like the people running the space should be trustworthy.
Thank you. Thank you, Sid.
Yeah,
Did I
thanks, Sid.
say it? Oh, go ahead.
Oh,
I was
no,
just
so I,
saying, like,
yeah.
sorry, QC.
Please, 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 I know you're super
I was,
excited.
I was just saying this brings us back to Gamma's point about vulnerability. What Sid just, this beautiful point Sid just brought in. I think the more we can be vulnerable and honest and open about where we're having challenges or our own experience and communicate that with compassion for ourselves and for each other, recognizing each other as human beings who are all, you know, doing our best, but coming up against the real limits of time and energy, and being able to create a safe space to communicate that by modeling that ourselves, by being open and vulnerable. I think that invites others to do the same.
With that, I just want to say, I mean, like with Sid and with Lonnie and with people like this in kernel blogs, I feel comfortable, being very honest that for me, I know that I have a responsibility as a steward, and I try to stay very, very much true to that. And also know that in conversations with Andy and with others, like small groups like this, that I myself am, trying to understand how I want to live in this Web3 context and what it means to do so in a really careful way. And so having a support network of people that include many people on this call that I can feel, when I'm as a steward, feeling like, okay, something's not quite right, or I'm like, how can I find the flow or the rhythm again? A lot of the times it comes through conversations with people like you. So
Yeah, that's really key, and it's actually super important as the space grows to like keep that kind of space. Because if you go on Twitter, I mean, everything on Twitter is just like very like all over the place and like very like I don't know, like it everyone's very excited about everything. And like I'm also very excited about everything, but it's like nice to be able to like go back to like a space where it's like, okay, well, like, how can we like talk about like things that aren't that, or like, focus on like more intentional conversation. So +1 on that.
So I know we're quite over time, but just one thing maybe I want to ask a bit here. So in Singapore, I think we are facing like a real issue with the healthcare sector. Like I personally know like 4 or 5 doctors who literally tell me straight up in their face that like they are finding it difficult to care for their patients anymore. Like, have you come across situations where like the kind of space that we have created in Web3 could be translated down into Web2, or how do we like figure a way to elevate them? Because in Singapore, I think kudos to whoever designed this space, but bonding every single healthcare worker with a $600,000 and a 5-year bond so that they work 18 hours a day nonstop makes healthcare very cheap for me, but it destroys their lives. So yeah, so it's something that we're grappling with here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an increasing problem, like in a lot of places where like as like everything kind of moves faster over time. So like it gets more challenging over time. And speaking of that, on my side, I do have to hop over to the onboarding stuff with Chris. So I will see you all soon.
See you, Scott. See you,
Bye,
Scott.
Scott. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I'll see you later. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks,
Cheers.
Vivek.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
QZ, I have some ideas on that. Oh, he's gone.